Well, good morning again, everybody. There's like a wave going across the room. It was awesome. Hey, so glad you're here today, whether you are live and in person or whether you're joining us online. For those of you joining us online, we do want to say a special hello to you as well. We're so thankful that you joined us wherever you are. We know a lot of folks will check us out there before they ever join us here. So while we're so excited that you're joining us there, we're going to be like a chocoholic on Valentine's Day when you join us here. Last week, we started this series in the Old Testament book of Ruth called Redeeming Love. And today, we're going to see the next part of that story as we talk about God's hand and how it's not always quite as visible as we may want it to be. Now, last week where we were in the story, Ruth, the Moabite, had connected herself to Naomi because Naomi's husband died. Ruth married one of her sons, but the sons are all dead. Naomi has to head back to Bethlehem now. It's been over 10 years. She and Ruth come back into town at the beginning of the barley harvest, which is very significant. I told you that last week, that where it ended was very important, that it was at the beginning of the barley harvest, because as we pick up the story today, Ruth chapter 2, Ruth goes into her mother-in-law and she says, this is Joel's paraphrase, "Mom, can I go out to a field, and if I find favor with that farmer, can I pick up the leftovers, the scraps? Can I glean from what the harvesters leave behind?" This was actually a strange question to ask because it wasn't the right time to do this. Let me go back a step. The Old Testament law required that as harvest was happening, anything they dropped, and when you're harvesting grain by hand, you're going to drop something accidentally. But the Old Testament law said you're supposed to leave it when you dropped it so that when harvest was done, people who were disenfranchised, people who were poor, widows, orphans, they could then come through and they could pick up all the scraps, and that's how God would provide for them. So, of course, not everybody obeyed the Old Testament law, and frankly, that was probably a lot of money they left behind on the ground in doing this, so not everybody obeyed this law. But Ruth is coming along and asking Naomi if she can go out at the beginning of harvest. At the earliest, you would have done this gleaning process towards the end, maybe in the middle. You would at least let the harvesters get out of that part of the field. Ruth is saying, hey, can I go at the beginning of this? Now, let's be honest here. If it wasn't for this, if it wasn't for someone else's charity, Naomi and Ruth were going to starve. It's really not like they had a choice. So Naomi says, well, yes, of course, my daughter, go. After all, I kind of want to eat. So Ruth heads out early in the morning, and she leaves Bethlehem, has to go out in the country. Okay, so she goes out in the country outside of Bethlehem. She finds a field, and she starts working in this field. Starts picking up these scraps that the harvesters are leaving behind. Well, lo and behold, a little later, the owner of the field, whose name is Boaz, this guy comes on the scene, and he greets his workers. He says, "The Lord be with you." And they respond, "Oh, the Lord bless you." I mean, this guy, they loved their employer. They loved this guy. Boaz notices, though, there's this Moabite woman. Now, he's Jewish. You could spot a Moabite a mile away. And he's like, that is not one of my workers. He goes over to his supervisor and he says, hey, who's that woman and who does she belong to? Now, that sounds kind of harsh in our society. We don't refer to people like, who do you belong to? What he's saying is, okay, what's her name? And he's saying, what's her family? Who's her tribe? Where does she belong? I mean, am I being invaded by the Moabites here? Or is there a reason I got a Moabite in my field? I mean, it's a pretty honest question. The supervisor says, oh, that's Ruth, the Moabite, who came back with Naomi to to Bethlehem. And she's been working so hard the entire time, except for one small break she took to grab some water. Now, the lights are coming on for Boaz because Boaz is a relative of Naomi's by marriage. Naomi's husband, Elimelech, was a relative of Boaz, which means since Ruth pledged herself to Naomi, that makes Ruth family. So Boaz is like, that's a family member out there. He trots up to Ruth and he says, my daughter, I don't want you gleaning or gathering these scraps in any other field. I've already given direction to the young men out in the field not to harm you. Now, why would he need to say that? Because she was a Moabite. And she was also doing this at the wrong time. So if the supervisor didn't kick her out, you'd expect the harvesters to at least kind of shush her along and go, look, it's not even time for you to do this yet. Move along. But he'd already given instruction, hey, don't harm her, don't lay a hand on her. And he even tells Ruth, hey, when you're thirsty, just go grab some water. No big deal. Basically your family. And Ruth is overwhelmed by this. She is just like, what have I done to deserve this kind of favor from you? I'm just a foreigner. And she bows down before him, and he goes, yeah, I know you are, but I also have heard what you did for Naomi, your mother-in-law, which happens to be his relative too. And he says, I heard how you left your homeland. You left your father and your mother, and you came to a place you did not know. You left everybody you knew to come with Naomi. What he's saying is, I am really impressed by who you are. I'm impressed by the fact that you are a woman of incredible integrity. He's basically saying, I am honored to know you. You are the hero here. I mean, that's basically what he's saying, to put it in our terms. And he says, and I want you to stay here. I want you to keep doing what you're doing, because it's his way of taking care of Naomi. And she's just shocked by all this. And then he even blesses her on top of that, and he says, may you find shelter in the Lord's wings. That's where you have found your refuge. May you be honored and blessed by him. And this is Boaz, who owns the field, who says, hey, he could have kicked her out, but he didn't. And so she keeps working, and she keeps going about doing all this stuff, and she keeps gathering all this up. And then we come to verse 17 of Ruth chapter 2, and we read this. I love this part. It says, so Ruth gleaned in the field until evening. Oh, I forgot to tell you, there was a mealtime before this. So they had this mealtime, and Boaz goes, hey, Ruth, come on over here and have some lunch with all of us. So he brings her over, he gives her bread, he gives her wine vinegar to dip the bread, and gives her roasted grain, and she has enough for even leftovers. Then she goes back to work. So she does this until evening. He's already fed her. He's had her working. Then she threshes the barley she had gathered. Now, threshing barley was not as simple as wheat. Sometimes they were able with wheat to throw it up in the air and let the wind separate it out for them. But barley is apparently different. Barley involved crushing or stomping or breaking. It was very physical labor. So what we just see as a summary of she threshed, bear in mind she has worked all day long, bending over, gathering this stuff up. And also what helped her out here was Boaz had also told his workers at mealtime, he said, fellas, don't lay a hand on her, but I want you to do something for her. Every now and again, pull a stalk out of the bundle and leave it for her. Give her extra. So she's threshing not just what she picked up, but what they left for her. And then when she had finished doing all this, okay, so whatever she had in raw form, she threshes it out. She ends up, and the Bible says it's an ephah. It's an Old Testament measurement. To put it in our terms, she had gathered roughly 30 pounds of finished barley by the time she was done threshing it. That was a lot of work that she just did. Then it goes on to verse 18. It says, then she carries it back to town. Remember, she had to leave Bethlehem to go out to the country. You don't farm in the middle of the city. You farm in the country. So she has to carry 30 pounds of this back to Bethlehem. And her mother-in-law saw how much she had gathered. I would say so. There's no record of a mule or anything. This is her hoofing it back into the city. Ruth also brought out and gave her what she had left over after she had eaten enough. Remember that leftover she had from lunch when she got the roasted grain? She had like a to-go bag. So she takes all this and she takes it and she gives it to her mother-in-law. And Naomi, who at the end, last time we really engaged with Naomi was in a chapter 1, and she's saying, don't call me pleasant, call me bitter. Naomi's changing her tune. She says, my daughter, where have you worked today? I mean, this is just this incredible this pantry full of food, with barley. And so, where have you been? And Ruth told her the story. Said, this is where I've been. This is where I was at. This is what happened. Tells all about the day. And then she throws in, like, in passing, oh yeah, and the owner of the field was a man named Boaz. She goes on the story, and Naomi goes, whoa, hold the phone. Boaz is a relative of ours. Not only that, he's a special relative that's in this tight circle that is called a family redeemer. More on that next week. But Naomi's kind of going, this is incredible. Of all the fields you landed in, this is one of our relatives. And she says, now, Ruth, you need to keep doing exactly what Boaz said. Go back and keep working the field. Keep working just like he told you to. You'll be safe there. Remember, it was early to be doing this, and she's a foreigner. But she said, you're right, you'll be safe in the field of Boaz. Keep doing what he told you to. May the Lord bless Boaz for his incredible generosity to you and his generosity to me. And Boaz is already honoring your dead husband and really by extension her dead husband. I mean, this was absolutely overwhelming blessing. And Naomi is just feeling it at this point. And so this is exactly what Ruth does. She goes back every day through the rest of barley harvest, even into the wheat harvest, because Boaz had told her to keep working. So she starts working roughly early spring-ish, it's hard to pin that down, all the way till like early summer. She's working, bringing all this back, supplying for the needs of Naomi. This is probably one of my favorite parts of the book of Ruth. And I probably said that last week. But this is now my favorite part of the book. It's incredible because you find just so many things line up so perfectly for all of this to happen. Which then makes us ask the question, is this a story of human ingenuity, human work ethic, or is it a story of God's hand? Because God doesn't do anything, at least Scripture doesn't say He did anything. And yet, here you have Ruth, this amazing woman of amazing character and of incredible physical stamina because she worked all day. She knew what she was doing. She knew how to get out there. She knew the customs, so she was clearly intelligent enough to know all this. She gets out there. She works hard. She worked very hard at this. Then she threshes the stuff, and she does this day after day after day. And yet she lands in the field of Boaz, who at first glance we go, cool, it's a guy. But then we learn he's a relative, which means she's safe to be there. I mean, of all the fields she could have landed in surrounding Bethlehem, she lands in his. That's amazing. But Boaz is no slouch either. I mean, Boaz's family tree taught him something too, because Boaz didn't look on her as just some foreigner. His first instinct was not to get her out. His first instinct was not to crush her. Even when he first talked to her, he goes, daughter. He addresses her with a term of respect because of who he is. And I think he learned that from his mom and dad. See, his dad was a man named Salmon, which we don't know a whole lot about. We know a lot about his mother. Boaz's mother was a woman named Rahab, who often is referred to by her former life, which was a prostitute. You see, Rahab, the prostitute, was someone who helped all the Israelite spies when they were coming into the promised land. She helped them. This is back under the time of Joshua. This was before the book of Ruth happened. So the book of Ruth opens with the time of the judges. This was before that. This was Joshua. And they were coming in. Rahab helped them. Rahab received God's mercy, and she's redeemed. And this incredible story of Rahab unfolds. Rahab marries Salmon. They have Boaz. And I would bet mom taught him something about looking on people differently and not just judging a book by its cover, because that's Rahab's story. So mom teaches Boaz this. Boaz comes along Ruth and he takes care of her, and he even tells the guys, leave extra. What a great guy. Ruth sure was lucky, wasn't she? I mean, she did the work. So did Boaz. He was generous. He was wealthy. He had it to give, so he gave. Was it a story of human ingenuity and grit, or is it a story of God's hand and his effort? Yes. It's both. You see, we're quick to write off these kinds of situations to serendipity, to chance, to luck. Right place at the right time. Really? Ruth was in the right field? That sure was fortunate. See, we're so quick to write things off as luck that we completely ignore the fact that God oftentimes moves in ways that don't involve flashing neon signs. Many times God is not working in these big, overt, flashy ways. He's usually working very quietly, very effectively, very efficiently, and as we pointed out last week, often in silence. And he just, like a master chess player, just lines these pieces up until suddenly we go poof, and we go, gee, aren't I lucky? Do you know how much trouble God went through just to bring you on this planet? Think about it. Your parents, they had to get together and have you. Their parents had to do that. Now we're up to your grandparents. Your great-grandparents, same story. This is getting exponential. We're up to like 8 people now. Your great-great, then your great-great. All these people, God had to line up to put you in the right place at the right time. And we want to say that's luck and that's happenstance, that's serendipity, that we just happened to work it out. That we just really lucked out through that? Did Ruth really get lucky? Not really. But see, here's the kicker, though. Here's what it is. What happens is many times, more often than not, it seems like in my life, the Lord's sovereignty looks like luck. many times his sovereignty looks like luck. From our perspective, not from his, he's been working. But from our perspective, it seems like, oh, I sure was lucky. I don't know what you were. Proverbs tells us this, that many of the plans of a person's heart, 19:21 tells us, but it is the Lord's purpose that prevails. In other words, wins. That we think we're doing all this, but really it's God. But the Lord's sovereignty often looks like luck. It looks like, gee, I was in the right place at the right time. You sure were. His time, in His place. He put you there. So sure you were, but it wasn't luck. Oh, heavens no, it wasn't luck. The half-brother of our Lord Jesus knew something about this too, that we're so prone to presume on tomorrow, presume on what we think we can do. And he's the half-brother of Jesus because they had the same mom, that would be Mary, but they had different dads. James was the son of Joseph and Mary. Jesus was the son of Mary and God. But they grew up together. Let that one sink in for a moment. This guy grew up with Jesus, but didn't believe in him until after the resurrection. Then he came to faith. But he writes this, jumping right in the book of James, chapter 4, 14 and 15. He goes, why? You don't even know what will happen tomorrow. What is your life? You're a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if it is the Lord's will, we will live and do this or that. See, because it's not luck. It's not our grit that's making it happen. It's the Lord's sovereignty making it happen. The Lord's sovereignty, however, often looks like luck, which is why we're prone to say it. It's why we're prone to think it. See, it's important that our thoughts and our belief, our language, really come together on what the truth really is about God's hand. That we have to match our language to the biblical reality, the truth of who God really is. Even what we think about God is going to come out in our language. Words are powerful. I literally make my living with words. If they're not spoken, they're written. Trust me, I can tell you the power of words. Which is why years ago I stopped saying, I'm lucky. Now if I say it, it's just, I'm either goofing off or it's accidental, then I got to correct it. My own children will correct me and say, well, really, Dad, it's not luck. Amen. Man, you're right. It's not. And my wife agrees. It's not luck. It's not luck. I'm not lucky. I am so unlucky that if I'm playing a board game and I need to roll a 3, I will roll a 2. I am not lucky. I don't win anything. I'm just not lucky. I am not here in this position today because of luck. Let me tell you how much luck I had. See, the reason I got here, some of you don't know this story. The reason I got here was because now I've been here about 4.5 years. So if you go back, so 9 years ago, I happened to have a few classes with a professor while I'm working on my doctorate. He and I really hit it off. And so he became like a mentor to me, then became my mentor as I'm working through this doctorate. Then he became finally the head guy on my committee for my project and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, because I know him, he happened to know the guy that was here as transitional pastor. So when this church was looking for a new lead pastor, they talked to people. He gets some names, calls the guy that knows me, mentions my name, and I end up here. That was not luck. I didn't even know they were talking about me. That's not luck. That was, though, the Lord working things out that I go, whoa, these men knew each other 20 years ago. God worked out a plan 20 years in the make. That's remarkable. I'm not lucky, but I am really blessed. I really, really am. I'm favored more than I deserve to be, which is why I want to encourage you to do the same thing. Stop saying luck. You're not lucky. You're not. Now, does God sovereignly decree that you will roll a 6 when you need to roll a 6 to beat your family in the board game? I don't know that He has. I could be wrong. I'm willing to entertain that maybe He has, but I'm not talking about that. And you know I'm not talking about that. I don't know that He cares about that, but we're not lucky when it comes to life. It's just not. The odds are against us all the time. God works these pieces out, so we got to stop saying lucky. If someone says, wow, you got that job, good, yeah, you were so lucky, or your work really paid off. No, it didn't. Because of all the people that could have been in this position, I was the one picked. That's not luck. So instead of saying luck, acknowledge the Lord's hand. Acknowledge what he's doing. Acknowledge his involvement in that equation. Acknowledge the fact that you are, as one gentleman here in our congregation says, I am blessed out of proportion. I love that. I've started using that expression. I love that. Whatever I think I might deserve, man, the Lord has blessed me so out of proportion. And then when I realize I don't deserve anything, and yet he has lavished grace on me, oh my goodness, how can I not give him credit for that? You see, I think part of this, the reason I harp on this, because language is powerful, but also is because we never can stray too far from what our primary mission on this planet is. Our primary mission on this planet is not to retire well. Our primary mission on this planet is not to die with the most toys, because you still die. Okay, our primary mission on this planet is not to become a better person. Our primary mission on this planet is not to know more Bible stuff. Our primary mission on this planet is to not go to heaven by ourselves. That's our primary mission. Which means I've got to look for opportunities to bring him into the equation everywhere I am. That I get these little moments that I can't just beat him over the head with a Bible every day. But maybe when they say, wow, you sure are lucky. No. But I am really blessed by God. You say, Joel, it feels kind of awkward. Then come up with something better. But just acknowledge his hand in the equation, that your life is not accidental. And maybe we don't say that enough. Your life is not accidental. God doesn't do accidents. He doesn't have to. He plans it all. He purposes it all. You are where you are because of that. We talked about, and now it's been over a year ago, we did this series that talked about work. And we said that even in the jobs that we hate, realize that's still a blessing from God that you have gainful employment. And we need to show far more gratitude. And that is also a mission field that he's put us in. Does that magically make us happy? No, but it at least can give some purpose to it. Because again, we're not lucky. We're under the care, the wings of the Lord, just like Ruth was. Now the last thing I want you to do is just as tangible. In the discussion guide, which if you're in a sermon-based group, you're going to have to do this anyway, so I'm just going to make everybody do it. Because I think first, everybody should be in a small group. Second, I think you ought to do this question. It's the very last one, and it's about writing a prayer. And I love these little exercises when we do this. It just says to write a prayer of gratitude for the Lord's work in your life in obvious and subtle ways. And that's the very last question in the discussion guide. I did this. I always do my discussion guide ahead of time because it helps me really internalize the message. And I had so, fun is the right word, but I don't want you to think that I was like fun, like a football game fun. But it was such a rewarding experience writing this out and realizing, wow. I mean, that's where I remembered, oh yeah, I got here not because of luck, but because the Lord worked out relationships that were 20 and 25 years old. Wow. I mean, it's just amazing to see how the Lord works, often in subtle ways. We'll be really honest with you. Most of the time, his ways are very subtle, but they're still his ways, and he's still working. And writing that prayer really helps you go, wow, you are amazing. It inspires worship in us. And I would even say pray that prayer. I've been doing that. I did my discussion guide on Thursday. Yes, Thursday afternoon. And so I've been praying this prayer every day, and it's just been amazing how it's changed my perspective even more. And I've been working on this sermon for 6 weeks. And it still changed my perspective to go, Lord, you are amazing in how you work. So I really encourage you to do that. I mean, because look at what just happened to Ruth in Ruth chapter 2. I mean, think about this. Ruth was raised the right way, met the right woman who happened to be really in the wrong place at the wrong time, but then she ends up coming to some level of faith, and now she ends up in the right field with the right righteous man that sets up the rest of her story and Naomi's story and, spoiler alert, sets up Jesus' story. You think any of that was luck? No. And neither is your life. Because even in the darkest times, in the times when it just seems so confusing and so like, what are you doing? Even then we can know that God's hand is working and he's moving and he's sliding pieces together. It may take 20 years for him to slide them together. Sure, he works on a very different timetable. But he's moving and he's working. And yet the Lord's sovereignty often looks to us like luck. But don't Don't fall for that lie of luck, because it's not. It's really God's hand every time.